It's my pleasure now to introduce our presenters for today. Valera Francis is the Director of the Office of Sponsored Programs at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. She is a peer reviewer and a peer review recipient. Mary Louise Healy is the Assistant Dean for Research Administration at the Johns Hopkins University Krieger School of Arts and Sciences. Mary Louise is a peer reviewer and is one of the Associate Directors of NCURA Peer Programs. Penny Maselli is the Associate Director of Sponsored Research at Wellesley College. She is a peer reviewer and Associate Director of NCURA Peer Programs. Chris Monahan is the Director of Sponsored Projects and Research Compliance at Providence College and is a peer reviewer. Jeff So is the Assistant Vice Provost for Research Compliance at Northeastern University. He is a peer reviewer and the current chair of the NCURA Select Committee on Peer Programs. At this point, I'm going to turn the program over to Mary Louise to get us started. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much, Megan, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today. We think you'll find this very informative, and it's an opportunity for you to talk with some of our experienced reviewers, which we think you'll really enjoy. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background on peer programs to get us started relatively briefly so that we can preserve most of our time for you to ask your questions of our panelists. And Penny Maselli, my co-associate director for the peer programs, is going to jump in and cover anything that I may be missing or that may need more discussion. So if we could go to the next slide, we'll get started. Okay, so there we are. There are our smiling faces, and you just met us. Megan did that nice introduction for us, and we're all very happy to be here with you today. And we hope you'll ask lots of questions. We know you will. Okay, go on. So what are peer programs? If there are questions about that, why don't we, in fact, we're asking what are peer programs, why don't we launch our poll? Megan, we had a poll? Okay. So what are peer programs? Whether you've heard about it or not, it's really an institutional offering of NCURA, and it's to help institutions improve their infrastructure supporting research activities. The services, I think every word on this slide is important. You know, the services provide a friendly outside perspective, and that's the truth. What peer programs are not is an audit. It's not an audit, it's an outside perspective on what you're doing well, what you might do differently, recommendations that we feel that the reviewers feel might help you to be more efficient. Okay, so what did we say about already knowing about that? Most of you know a little bit and fairly familiar, so that's good. We don't have any peer reviewers with us or any individuals from institutions that have already had peer reviews. So this will all be some nice new information for you. And some of you've never heard about it, so we're glad you're here so we can tell you more about it. Okay, thank you. We could exit the poll. There we go. So we're back to learning a little bit more about it. So we have some different offerings through peer programs, and it is, again, not an audit. It's a friendly service to an institution. I got rid of my dogs, and now we have the telephone, so I apologize. We have peer reviews, and that's an overall holistic look at what's happening at the institution as it relates to the sponsored programs enterprise, and it can focus on the central level of the sponsored programs. It can focus on unit level. It can focus on research compliance, and there's also a global peer review. So the institution decides on what is it that we want to look at? And let's try to arrange a review to look at that, either at the central level, the unit level, or compliance. We also have peer advisory services, and you can see the different peer advisory services we have. And this is a little bit more targeted when the institution has something specific on which it would like to focus. They ask us to come in and, can you help us with research administration planning? We're a small institution and we're just trying to get sponsored programs office off the ground. Can you help us with that? Can you help us with a focused analysis? There's something that we really are a little bit worried about if we're doing it right, or it's starting to grow. This area is starting to grow, and we want to make sure that we're prepared for the growth. So can you just look at this focus section of what we're doing? And we also have directed education program that brings peer reviewers out to the institution for custom educational sessions. Okay, and how do we do this? What are our methods? Look at the next slide for that. So it's very organized. We look at some background materials. The institution completes a briefing book for us with some information. It's a self-study kind of thing, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a future slide. So that's very important. The peer reviewers are very important. You can see there the average is 27 years experience. That's not for your team that comes out to do the peer review for you. That's for an individual. So that's quite impressive. These are really very experienced people. And we're very careful. It's a true peer review. We match the reviewers with the institution's needs. So you're going to get someone who really understands your type of institution and what you're dealing with to make it a true peer review. We use standards, national standards, to conduct the review. We assess the institution against the standards. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We have interviews. We'll also talk a little bit more about that. What we try to do when we get to campus, or we can do these interviews remotely now in the COVID-19 world where there are travel restrictions and people may not even be working on campus, we can still go ahead with the peer reviews because we can do a virtual site visit. And we want to talk to all the stakeholders for the research enterprise, anyone who touches on it. And that's going to be, of course, depend on the institution itself. That's going to be very individualized. And I think Penny would agree that really the important word with our peer reviews is individualized. It's all about the institution's needs and how we can best meet the institution's needs. And that's something we want everybody to be assured of. It might be a little bit different from some other types of external reviews. A detailed report, a really detailed report. We'll talk a little bit more about that too. Go on to talk about the process. So as I noted in the last slide, the reviewers really are very experienced. The average years of experience is 27, but all reviewers have at least 10 years of experience in the field. So you can be assured that the reviewer, that the team that comes for your review is going to really understand what's happening in research administration. And the advice, again, is going to be suited especially to your institution. The briefing book materials we talk a little bit more about, but that really allows the reviewers to be prepared to talk to the stakeholders, to understand what your processes are, what your policies are, how things work, how many people you have and where, and just really understand all the factual information about the sponsored programs enterprise at your institution. When you decide you want to go ahead with a peer review, there's a charge letter to the reviewers that identifies the institution's specific concerns and sets out goals for the engagement. What is it that you really hope that we're going to be able to help you with? Even though we're going to look at all of the standards, what is it that you really want to get out of this? Because again, personalized, we want the institution to get what it needs out of this. Okay, we'll continue. There's more to our process. On the next slide. There's a Presite call. So we have a charge letter from you and you've told us what it is that you are trying to do, but we still want to learn more before we start looking in depth at your policies, your procedures. So we have a call with the institution and we want to learn about goals that may not be written in the charge letter, any special concerns. We want to talk about sensitivities. You know, if the institution wants to say, oh, this is a real hot potato, so if you try to catch it or throw it to anyone, it's going to be a problem. So please, we'd really like, you know, we want you to know that that's sensitive. And we're sensitive to that. So part of the reason for that call is so that we can understand that any underlying tensions or anything of which we should be aware that's going to ensure that we do the best job that we can for you. Then there's the site visit. It can be, again, it's generally in person, but in the time of travel restrictions and distancing, we can do this as a virtual site visit, which we've done several times and it's worked very well. So we're very happy about that. And the interviews give us a 360-degree view of the operations that are that you're having practice on a daily basis. The report, again, it talks about the current operations. It highlights any best practices. You know, a peer review is about learning what you can do better, but it's also about learning about us saying, you know, this is something that you're doing on a day-to-day basis at your institution, and this is a best practice. And, you know, this is something that we want you to know so that you can continue. And it's going to be in our report because the leadership is likely going to see this report, and they should know what is best practice within the research administration profession. So it will detail those things as well as our recommendations for improvement and things that you might consider doing differently to help make things more effective, more efficient, more compliant. Okay, we go on to the next. So we talked a little bit about the standards. Every engagement, if we're going to do a peer review for you, we're going to base it around standards, and that makes sure that we're assessing, those reviewers are assessing on what a group of research administrations, very experienced research administrators determine should be things that we're all doing. So it assesses all aspects, and because we look at all of the standards in a full review, it's giving us a holistic view. So they were developed by a committee of very experienced people, and they're updated periodically so that when the reviewers come out, they're assessing against standards that are current and that take into consideration all of the current landscape and environment in which we work. So that's something you can be assured of too. Okay. And on the next slide, we'll see that our standards are accompanied by features that the peer reviewers use to ensure that that standard is fully addressed in the report. So the standard might talk about a general topic, but the features are very specific. And you can see that these reports are going to be very detailed. For a central level review, there are 26 standards and 194 features. And the reviewers are going to address in some way all of the features that they're looking at when they come to your, when they do the site visit and when they write the report. And you can see the examples of unit level, the number of features there, and the number of features on the research compliance review, which it's a lot. We're giving you a lot of information. We're looking at a lot of different things, okay? We'll go on to the next slide, which has a sample standard, I believe. Okay, so we just chose a sample so you can get an idea of what the standards look like. And this is the standard for proposal review and submission. So you know that this is what the reviewers are looking at, and the reviewers know that that's what they're looking at. And if you're interested in seeing the standards, please email peerreview@ncura.edu and we will send you those. And we're always happy to give you that kind of information, talk to you about the possibility of a review, answer any questions you might have, although many of your questions might be answered today, so we'd be happy to follow up after today. Okay. So we talked a little bit about the briefing book. And that, again, is a self-study. We ask you for information about your structure, your policies, procedures for each standard. The reviewers are going to arrive informed. They're not going to come and sit with the people they're interviewing and ask factual questions because they're going to already have those answers. You've given them those answers in that briefing book. The institution decides who completes it. It usually different people or offices are responsible for different sections if it's a bigger institution. If it's a smaller institution, it may be one or two people who complete it, but that's entirely up to the institution itself. And it's a mix of description or narrative and appended documents or links to things that you have available on your websites. So policies, forms, charts, organizational charts, things like that. We have a little sample in the next slide of what it looks like. And this is just to give you an idea of what we asked for in the briefing book. And you see we have highlighted insert answer here. So it's a question and then you answer it and in the way that is best going to give us the information. Sometimes that's a few sentences. Sometimes it says, see attached report. Sometimes it's here's a link where you can get this information. The important thing about the briefing book is, almost all of the information is going to be, if not all, is going to be things that are already available. You're not creating anything for us. You're just pointing us to the information. You're laying it out for us. You're giving us links to it so that we can arrive very informed about your campus. And when we ask questions, they're not questions that could have been answered here because they already were answered here. Okay. And this site visit, whether it's virtual or whether it's in person when we're able to travel again, this is just a list of the people we might expect to meet with at during a site visit. This depends, again, on the institution. Some smaller institutions, one person might cover a lot of these areas. There may be other people or offices or positions that impact the research enterprise at the institution, and if so, we'd like to meet with all of those people because, again, what we're doing is we're looking at how everything fits together and how everything works together, whether everything works together. So we need to get the whole view of it. So what's the timeline for this? We start out by requesting the peer program service. We'd work with you on that, and then we pull together a review team for you. The number of reviewers depends on the size of the institution. You'd have 2 or 3 reviewers depending. Then you start working on your background materials. That's the briefing book. And we'll have a time frame for sharing that with us so that the reviewers will have time to review that and be prepared with some really good questions when they come on site. Use the time effectively. That last slide you can see, the reviewers are going to be meeting with a lot of different people, and there's not a whole lot of time to do that. So we try to use the time as best we can. So we're prepared with things so that when we get there, we're really talking about things that need to be discussed in a meeting and that we can't just look up ourselves. So the site visit with the interviews and questions, the draft report, we commit to having that to the institution in 30 days after the site visit. And the draft report is really very close to a final report, but we want to give the institution the opportunity, 15 business days, to go through it and provide comments on anything that might be inaccurate or any area of sensitivity that maybe needs to be expressed differently or needs to be discussed before the final report is issued. At that point, usually there aren't a whole lot of comments because we've done our homework and we're really prepared, and we feel we understand the institution and the report's just about ready to go. So after we get those inaccuracies, sensitivities, we'll have a final report within 10 business days. And the report goes to whomever the institution decides should have the report. That's not, we don't decide that, that's for the institution to decide. And then what you do with it is for you to decide also. Take the recommendations that you think you want to implement, and that's our process. Penny, is there anything you'd like to add?
I think I would just emphasize that the reviewers are who are chosen to, the individuals who are chosen to be reviewers, don't stick to one model that they sort of favor for any particular way that research is structured on a campus. They're really very familiar with a wide variety of models, and no one size does not fit all. And so when they're approaching the recommendations that they're going to put in that report, they're really thinking carefully about what they've seen work well in various places and what might work well at your institution, given where you are at the moment.
Okay, great, thank you. So that was just a brief overview because we wanted to give you an idea, because we saw on that poll that most people that have been able to join us today are not terribly familiar with peer programs. So that we hope that helped give you a little familiarity. And we're going to get to the fun part of the session today and talk to our panelists. And we already have a question. So what are some practices you've seen during peer review and implemented at your own institution? And maybe tell us about some practices you've been particularly impressed with. So the reviewers learn from this process too. I mean, that's, you know, sometimes the institutions are doing things so well that impacts the reviewers. So, Chris, you have some things you've seen?
Sure, thank you so much. I'm always impressed at every institution that I go to. There's always something that I learned from them. There's also a lot to share. One thing that I've seen at several institutions is that when they're struggling with making a process change, that they don't stick within their maybe just sponsored research in terms of trying to change that process. If it's impacting the research enterprise and it touches other areas, they may create a cross-functional team to address whatever that process area is. And that is something that, as I've seen that work at other institutions, that I've been doing more of here, is really thinking outside of just research admin and bringing in human resources, IT, data security, whomever it is that I need to bring in, and creating more cross-functional teams to solve issues, and that it's a shared problem across the areas, and also that we come up with a shared solution.
Great, thank you. Other panelists? Yeah.
I can add something from a couple of my peer reviews that I conducted. So two of the things that we looked at implementing at our institution that I saw at other universities was, one, as our institution has grown, we've gotten a lot of subawards, more subawards. So one of the things that I found at some of the other institutions is they had subaward teams who only looked at subawards. They did nothing else, process in, process out. So what's happening now is we've actually created a subaward specialist position where that individual will only be processing subawards, not only on the award side, but a lot of PIs don't understand that there's a difference between contracted services, subawards, vendors, and consultants. So that individual will also be beneficial at that part of the process. And one other thing, and this goes back many years, is proposal development. As federal agencies and other organizations started to want institutions to do more interdisciplinary work, we didn't have an individual on campus to do that. That takes a lot of time and a lot of coordination. So what we did was we created a proposal development unit within the Office of Sponsor Programs, and that has really been beneficial to our PIs and to our office. So those are two things that I found at prior reviews that we've implemented at our university.
Thank you. Okay, so we do have another question. Somebody would like to follow up on that. That was about some things that you've implemented that you've seen worked well. What are some of the common challenges you've seen, and what would you recommend to address those? Jeff?
Did you say me?
Yeah, I did.
So one of the things I've seen as part of these reviews is, well, is trying to get the attention of the leadership to implement the changes that are sometimes obvious to those who are doing what they're in the field of research administration at their institution. However, our bringing in the peer reviewers is actually a strategic decision to help them persuade or compel changes within their organization. And it's one thing for me to tell my leadership, you know, that this something needs to change. It's entirely different and often more persuasive if you have external people telling you to do the same. So I think that's one of the, you know, getting leadership to buy in. Because a lot of times we are talking about resources. You know, we are talking about additional resources to meet the needs, the growing needs of a growing research enterprise that we're examining. So I think, you know, I think that's been can be a constant theme in the purpose of our visit. What are we trying to achieve? Who are we trying to persuade? And getting the attention, the right attention from the right level of leadership to help put themselves in a position to succeed.
Great, thank you.
And I would add, on the other side of things, engagement of faculty in the review process is critical and important. And what I've seen in many of the reviews is that they have not always had a voice in terms of the research enterprise or the research process. And as a result of just having the review, they feel heard. And usually there can be recommendations that come from there for finding better ways to engage faculty in research administration and in the various processes, or in making determinations in terms of future research directions. So I'd say that that's sort of common too. I think it's what Jeff talked about, you know, getting leadership, and then on the other side, it's getting faculty. So just wanted to add that perspective.
Yeah, I think most of our, sorry.
I was just going to add that creating that feedback loop within the institution is really important. And sometimes what we're finding in these peer reviews, when we do interview the faculty and the senior administration, is sometimes there's a disconnect between what they think they're providing as supportive infrastructure for the faculty to carry out their research and what the faculty are actually perceiving. And so sometimes there's some real value in that report to sort of very diplomatically surface those things and offer some suggestions about what the faculty actually really might appreciate in the way of support. So that can be helpful as well.
Yeah. Great, thank you. We also have a question on, from your peer reviews, what feedback methods do you think work best, and getting input from stakeholders to identify roadblocks and improve operations?
That was part of what I was just sort of leading into, I guess, but I guess I would follow up with something that I've noticed some institutions doing with their policy development process in particular, is making sure that they build very clear steps into any policy development where there's an opportunity for the constituents on campus to comment about that. And that can really do a couple of things. It can point out to you where maybe some of the policy language isn't as clear as you thought it would be, and you need to tweak that. But also it can sort of educate the campus during the development process as they start to become familiar with sort of why this policy is being developed in the first place. So I think institutions who do that very intentionally as part of their policy development, you know, that's a real strength for them.
Thank you. So we do have a question, and I expected this question. What was the peer review process like for you as a host? What would it be like as a host? And Valera was a host. So, you know, and you have both perspectives, so that'll be very interesting.
Yeah, that's true. And I think I'm in a group of one today because nobody else on the panel, or it seems nobody else in the audience was a peer reviewer or hosted a peer review. So I wrote a couple of things down. So if I get a little long-winded about the host perspective, please do stop me. But we've had 2 peer reviews at our university. The first one was conducted in 2009. The second one was conducted in 2015. And the first thing that you should know is that once a decision has been made by your institution, a significant amount of time, planning, preparation, coordination, and scheduling happens before that peer review team even sets foot on your campus. But don't let that scare you, because the return on investment is worth it. That's my 3 favorite words, return on investment. So the process begins, as you were told earlier with the slides, is it begins with crafting that charge letter. And that's usually going to be prepared by your chief research officer or another senior level administrator. This is important because it provides NCURA with the first introduction to your institution, and it also provides critical information about why you want or need a peer review conducted. So have you heard the saying that teamwork makes the dream work? Well, it definitely takes a team to prepare that all-important briefing book. You're going to need to allocate a significant amount of time to respond to the questions so that your peer review team can adequately prepare for their visit to your institution. But don't be alarmed if you can't answer all the questions or provide all the documentation that they're requesting in that briefing book. I think that that's pretty normal. We weren't able to do it, and I'm putting my peer reviewer hat on. Most institutions, cannot answer each question in a substantive manner. And the institution is given a deadline to complete the briefing book and send that briefing book back to each of the peer reviewers. Now, in our first, and probably our second one too, I don't remember, it was paper. So we had to, Federal Express over 100 pages in a binder by Federal Express to each of our peer reviewers. And there were 3 on each of our peer reviews. So after your reviewers have had enough time to review the document, that pre-site visit call is scheduled with the review team and those folks that are in the NCURA office. You determine who at your institution should be present for that call. At our institution, it was our vice chancellor for research. It was the individual who was, coordinating everything on campus. And I was also part of that on-site, that pre-site visit call. And this is probably your last opportunity to ask any questions of the peer review team that you want to ask before they come to your campus. And that's also the time when your peer review team can follow up with any questions that they want to ask your institution. It's a significant call, and you actually do want to have the people on that call that can respond to those questions or have any questions for the peer review team. You should also receive the final team schedule at that time. And that's important because as host institution, you're responsible for certain logistics for the team. So you need to appoint somebody to handle these arrangements, to coordinate with NCURA office staff. We make arrangements for a hotel for the team, travel to and from the airport to the hotel, and then travel to and from the hotel each day that the review is being conducted. That was fairly easy for our institution because the hotels actually provided transportation as a courtesy. You also provide on-site lunch and snacks for the peer reviewers. The schedule is going to be tight, so you actually don't want to have them leave the institution or the building to go off-site to do lunch because of that tight time schedule. And what was good for our university is we accommodated the team at hotels that were less than 10 minutes from our institution. And what was good about those hotels is, food is important when you have such a busy day. Those hotels also had great restaurants, and we were able to secure a suite for the team leader because the team debriefs at the end of each day. So there was a sitting room where the team could gather at the end of the day and debrief and go over the details of what happened during the course of the day. scheduling, the stakeholder groups. I think that was hardest part for the institution, because for one thing, you have to come up with the stakeholder groups, and then you have to decide which individuals within those groups that you're going to invite to meet with your peer review teams. Some of the groups are small, you don't have to decide, but some of them can get quite large, especially when stakeholders are faculty. And then you don't want to mix, you wouldn't want to mix like humanities faculty with your hard sciences faculty. So scheduling does tend to get pretty complicated at times. I'll put it like that. So you also want to make sure that the rooms can accommodate the size of the groups that you have. And you want to have your meetings in one building if you can do that. And we were able to do that. So that's the process up until the time when you're scheduling, your groups are meeting. So the institution is also responsible for that part. But you also want to ensure that there's an open meeting time at the end of all the sessions, just in case the peer review team wants to meet with any of the groups for additional questions. We found that happened at both of our peer reviews. So team leads, they draft up the report, and when we receive the draft report, and I think at most institutions, you're not going to agree with everything that's in that draft. And so it's great that we got the opportunity to review the draft documents, give comments, and send it back to the review team so they can probably regroup, to refer back to their notes to see if we as an institution misinterpreted, or if they as a peer review team misinterpreted what was said. So just in closing, they gave you a rough estimate on the timeline. Well, I'm going to tell you the timeline for our peer reviews. So as I said, the first peer review was conducted in 2009. Charge letter was sent in on February 27, 2009. The peer review was conducted from March 30th through April 1st, 2009. It was a 2.5-day peer review. The final report was received by our institution on June 1st, 2009. Second review, the charge letter was sent on October 7th, 2015. The peer review was conducted from November 9th through November 11th, 2015. It was 3 full days, and the final report was received on February 16, 2016. So don't let all the work that goes into prepping for a peer review scare you away. Like I said, there's going to be a significant return on the investment. And who knows, maybe in another 2 or 3 years, our institution is going to host another peer review. Our vice chancellor would like to see one done every 5 years. So, hey, that'll probably happen. Well, 5 years has passed, but we still may conduct another peer review. We found it very beneficial.
Valera, all I heard was snacks, so that's all I need.
Wait, snacks and good food.
Oh, so Valera, I was on your second peer review, if you remember, and that hotel was stellar and the food was excellent. And I think the reviewers would agree, though. All the host institutions are so welcoming of the reviewers because they want the review, they want the good information, and they realize that they're getting all of the experience, the collective experience of the reviewers, and advice coming from a true peer, from somebody who truly knows what it is that they're going through. And you talked a bit about timing, which raised a question here about timing. That we have some new leadership coming in, and we're considering a review. What are your suggestions about timing on that? What are the benefits of doing it before the new leadership comes in versus right after versus waiting a while?
Yeah, and that's a great question because for both of our peer reviews, there was a lot of transition going on. But both reviews, chancellors have changed, provosts had changed. Even our vice chancellor, for the first peer review that was conducted, vice chancellor sponsored programs moved from under the graduate school to under the provost office. So the question was, well, should we wait until everything kind of settled down? But it was decided that before everything was put in place, that it was probably best to bring that peer review team in to look at where we were now as we were making these changes, and before those changes were made, organizationally, maybe we should have them come in to make sure that we're moving in the right suggestion and give us recommendations before we do anything. So to us, it was better to be proactive than reactive in bringing the NCURA review team into our institution.
Thank you. Jeff, Chris, what have you seen on timing on these things? I'm sure you've been on reviews where there was a change in leadership.
Yeah, I've been involved in both, and I think it really depends on the institution. What I will say is institutions should be bringing us in because they want to hear what we have to say. You're not bringing us in when things are perfect or waiting for things to be perfect to give you a gold star. That's not this kind of review. Our review is meant to be helpful and to help you move forward to be better or to be effective. So there is no perfect time, nor do you have to wait to try to be perfect. I had one provost say to me at one of the reviews, now that you've seen us in our underwear, tell us what you really think. And there is a certain amount of vulnerability, right, to having outsiders come in. You're sort of showing them what's working and what's not working. And we really do want an honest picture of what's happening to try to help them move forward and be effective. So I tell institutions, it will depend, but when they make the decision and they commit, we will come in and help move them forward from wherever they are to wherever they're going, or give them a sense. The report can be for a brand new leader. I've come in when there was a brand new leader who was there for a month. And that report then becomes a blueprint of action items and some considerations and a look at where the institution is at. And that can be really helpful too.
Yeah, just to echo what Chris and Valera have said, there is no perfect time. There's no ideal time. I think transition in leadership is at some institutions is constant. So even if you wait a year, you'll be without someone else on the leadership team, and there's a transition. So I don't think there's an ideal time. I have seen though, when there is new leadership, that can be a compelling factor as to initiating a peer review. When new leadership does arrive, they want to know a little more about the landscape from an external perspective, and that has triggered peer reviews.
Very good. So we have a question about the meetings and the individuals in the meetings, and we did show that slide about the different stakeholders who are maybe included, but maybe a little perspective from the reviewers on how many people are representing the different functions and who's mixed together in a meeting and during a site visit, whether it be in person or virtual. So from the reviews I've done, I think I can take that one to get us started. What we ask is that a person is not in a meeting with a person he or she supervises. So that what we want is, this is our chance to tell you what is happening and what we see that's working and is not, and you need to be honest. So we want people to be free to talk, and all the meetings are confidential. So, and in the report, we're never going to say, Susie Q said that she doesn't like working with Jimmy. It's going to be, we heard from faculty that this is what's happening, or we heard from pre-award administrators that this is what's happening. So it's all confidential. We don't attribute statements to everyone. And I found, I mean, the three of you can add to this, but I found that at the institutions where I've been a reviewer, everyone's been very forthcoming in the meeting and wants to give information and wants us to get a good picture of how things are working there.
I think our reviewers are very good at putting people at ease when they're in the room during those interviews and sort of reminding them that we are there to be helpful and we're a friendly look at what they're doing. And once they understand that it's not high stakes, it's not an audit, it's really us there to help you, people do tend to open up and share.
Thanks, Penny.
From the institutional perspective, I would say that because and for both our reviews, and this was before I was a peer reviewer, like OSP staff had a separate meeting that I was not in. So I think that the way NCURA puts the groups together and they don't have like the directors in with the staff, I think that that's a critical piece here, because I think folks are more open when they don't think that, you know, the person that supervises them or who makes the decisions in that session with them. Same thing with me. I wasn't in a session with my vice chancellor, so you know, I just felt very free and open, you know, to say what I wanted to say regarding what was going on in sponsored research administration at UNCG. And, you know, people reported back to me after they sat in those sessions and said, you know, how easy it was to respond because, you know, nobody was looking over their shoulders, nobody was listening to what they were saying. So I think that the way that you guys, well, you know, I'm a reviewer too now, but the way that it's set up and the way the groups are scheduled, it's a positive way that it's done.
Thank you.
So, Mary Louise, if I can jump in, I see a question here from the audience that might be a good one to address. It says, what have been some of the best practices you've seen or recommendations you've made for encouraging faculty to engage in research, especially at PUIs? And because I work a lot with PUI institutions, this is something that I see institutions struggle with as a challenge all the time. Certainly at predominantly undergraduate institutions, the teaching loads tend to be heavy, and so time is always one of the factors that is named as a reason why faculty maybe are not as research active as they would even like to be. There just doesn't seem to be enough time. So what I've seen some institutions doing, and at times have recommended this, is that the institution really look at the internal grant programs that they're putting forward and the internal resources, so that they're offering things that will actually help deal with that time issue. So for example, some institutions might take a portion of their indirect costs and put that towards a summer stipend program that faculty can apply for internally, or for a course release program that faculty can apply for internally. So that's just a few thoughts, but that's a common thing that we address with PUI institutions in their reports.
Great, thanks, Penny. And we have a question about who do you typically see initiating the review? You know, what level of administration? Is it the offices of sponsored programs, or is it the vice president for research? What have you seen? How these are initiated?
I've seen both.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I've seen both. I've seen it push up from the sponsored research office as a means of garnering more support, resources, and attention from leadership, particularly at the smaller institutions. And then I've seen it come from an AVP or even a president in one case, many times the provost, when they're looking at either there's a leadership change or they want to see what's happening and what they can do to further the research enterprise. In many cases, sometimes a problem can, some loud faculty complaints or some problem could facilitate it, but that's only some of them. Others of them are just sponsored research offices that want to be seen and heard, and having an outside voice will help that happen and help them garner the resources they're looking for.
Thank you.
And I agree with Chris. At our institution, the suggestion was brought to our associate provost for the first review, and for the second review, our vice chancellor actually initiated the second review because she thought it was just time for us to, just have a review. Things had changed, and she wanted the reviews brought back in.
What a review is not, though, it's not a personnel evaluation. We are not going in there to, some institutions have contacted NCURA peer review, say, hey, we've got this problem, can you come in here and help us fix it? That's not what we're there for. We're not there to fix those issues. We're there to look at practices and processes against standards and help the institutions improve. We're not looking at individuals' performance.
And I think it's also a common misunderstanding, and that, why would somebody want a peer review? There must be a problem. And like you said, Chris, that's usually not the case. Sometimes something bubbles up and it brings it to attention of some office that maybe let's look at this a little bit more. But usually it's for the other reasons we've discussed, and really there's not a problem. So that's not what it's about. It's not an audit and it's not problem solving. It's just what we call it. It's a review. It's looking at how everything works together. So other than what Valera told us about the snacks and the hotel and the transportation, what can an institution do to be prepared for a review so that the site visit is used to its best advantage and the report really covers everything that's going to help improve the sponsored programs enterprise? Jeff?
So I think we've touched upon it already, but there are competing interests here in that often the organizers want to give every stakeholder a voice and an opportunity to participate in the review. At the same time, the reviewers have between 24 hours and 72 hours to meet everyone and digest all of the information. I think more thought should be put into the organization of the interviews themselves, the volume of people, the makeup of the people in that room together. And because I've been in virtual meetings with 25, 30 plus faculty, that wasn't very effective because there was just too many people that didn't get a chance to contribute. But I completely understood why so many people were in that room. And oftentimes I'd take down cell phone numbers and call them after hours, to finish up if they wanted to tell me something separately. So that's, giving some thought into the interviews themselves, who should be in that room, who are critical for this review process, and at the same time trying to ensure that everyone at their university has an opportunity to say what they need to say.
Okay, thank you. So we're nearing the end of our time with the audience and with the panelists. Is there anything that any of you would like to add that in further addressing any of the questions or anything we haven't covered?
Yeah, I'll start by just saying I'm really proud of the peer review program, and We take great care in the selection of peer reviewers. Our peer reviewers have to have excellent interpersonal skills, listening skills, communication skills, writing skills are critical to being an effective peer reviewer. The last thing we are is judgmental. Research is a heavily regulated industry, period, okay? And what we try to promote is a risk-based approach to effectively overseeing research administration. And we fully acknowledge that every institution is different. Every institution has different sponsors, different scopes of work, different liabilities, different species of animals that they work with, you name it. So we do not, we're not there to preach. We're not there to tell people that they're doing it wrong. We are there to be a resource and to provide a roadmap, a long-term roadmap to help institutions get to where they need to be or where they want to be.
I don't think any of us can take exception with any of that. We would all 100% agree with that. So we have we're just about out of time, so I'd like to thank all of our reviewers and our reviewer/host, Valera, for taking time to talk with the audience about peer review. If there is if you'd like more information on this, please contact us at our email address, and we'd be happy to send you some information, plan a phone call where we can talk with you about your specific needs and about the possibility of a review. We're happy to talk, even if you just want to talk about planning for the future and you might want to do something. We're happy to do that to help you to plan for your assessments. And it's becoming more and more important that institutions have periodic assessments. And we're happy to help you with that in any way that we can. So we hope that we'll hear from some of you. And thank you again to the panelists. Thank you to Megan for helping us with everything for the webinar and with your wonderful introduction. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.